Hello and welcome to Differential Discussions. I'm Melissa,
And I'm Dave.
and today we're starting looking at BALs.
My favorite.
So,
So
bron-
BAL, bronchial alveolar lavage,
Well,
right? So this is the first body fluid that's not a body fluid.
yeah,
So this process, from my understanding, basically, you're essentially just kind of flushing saline into the lungs, into the alveolar space, and then sucking it back up. So twofold here. It's therapeutic in that it's kind of debriding and getting junk and cells and maybe even infectious organism things out. And then diagnostically, you can see what that stuff is, right? And we can do cell counts and do diffs. Making slides is usually quite difficult because of the mucus that's kind of associated with these. But yeah, everyone loves BALs, right? I mean, favorite body fluids.
oh yes, our favorite. We love them. Nope.
So here we are on a low power and good practice. We're going to scan around and we're going to look for things that might stand out. Yeah. So we have these wispy kind of purple, like, and it kind of speaks to like the junky kind of quality of some of these fluids. So I saw what appears to be a couple of like squamous epithelial cells, which isn't going to be abnormal. We may see bacteria. Bacteria is not as crucial or critical of a finding in a BAL, given that we're kind of outside the body, right? So we're passing something through the oral cavity of an individual. Very easy to pick up squamous epithelial cells and bacteria and things like that.
All right, I'm just gonna drop down somewhere then.
Sounds good. Awesome. This is actually a really pretty BAL, to be honest.
Hmm.
So a lot of familiar looking cells, got a little bit of red cells and a lot of hematopoietic stuff. Yeah, I like this slide.
Yeah, this is like one of the nicer BALs that we've.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks very clean considering.
Okay. Well, I'll drop down further so that we can look at it on oil.
Okay. So in terms of cells that might be specific to BALs, there's one that stands out in particular, a ciliated columnar cell. If we see one, we'll point them out. You don't always see them in the differential. Sometimes they're actually kind of hard to pick out if they're recovered at all. My favorite is when you see them on the chamber, when they're still alive and they're just kind of flopping around. Yeah. All right, so I see what look like a lot of neutrophils.
Yeah.
Neutrophil. I do see a mono, to my terrible M. But yeah, a lot of neutrophils. Neutrophil. And a very pretty red cell.
Yeah, the red cells look good in here.
Yeah, very good. Oh no, Melissa, what could this be?
Hmm.
Any thoughts?
Could be junk.
So yeah, a lot of times this is just like junk stain precipitate.
Yep.
Our students and less experienced people might like freak out about a clump of bacteria or something, but to me, there's not enough uniformity between the individual elements to
Yep.
really be bacteria. So I think that's just junk.
Yeah.
It's great. Mono.
Yeah.
Mono, and then some neutrophils.
Yep. And the neutrophils are just as heavily vacuolated and ugly as the monos here.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, this fella's a little interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Lymphy.
yeah, lymphy, right? So kind of running through the possibilities of things it could be. Lymph is the only one that truly makes sense.
Yeah.
The other thing that's like much less likely would be like nucleated red cell or something like that. But I think this looks lymphoid. The chromatin pattern is just inconsistent.
Well, he just looks clumpier, so I wonder if he's becoming reactive.
Yes, he might be, because that's the color of the cell is the cytoplasm is like a little
Yeah.
odd to me, very dark blue.
Seeing an NRBC in a BAL though, that'd be kind of
Yeah, that'd be strange, right? Especially if you had a CBC on the individual and there was no NRBCs in the CBC. Right. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. But that's the other piece that's important is to take into consideration the type of fluid, because if it was a CSF,
ooh,
maybe,
yeah.
right?
So it might be too much of a sidebar to talk about that, or
oh, that's right. Go ahead.
So what's significant about that is if you're seeing nucleated red cells in a CSF, one of the complications that can happen is as you're sampling for the CSF, you could strike a vertebra, yep, which might have hematopoietic bone marrow, essentially, right? And then so you could pick up these really immature developing cells, and NRBCs, really immature cells would all be signs of like a bone marrow contamination.
Yeah.
If there's bone marrow contamination in this BAL, that doctor should be fired.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Nope.
Ooh, look at that fluffy, beautiful.
Beautiful. So we always categorize monomax. Well, for us, right? We categorize monomax in the same category. This is very clearly a macrophage.
Yeah.
Right? No question about that. Beautiful cell. We have that one nuclei and the NC ratio. Perfect. Excellent macrophage. And it's flanked by neutrophils.
Yep. Oneness.
Yep. So not uncommon to see a lot of phagocytic cells in a BAL. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh. So we're consistently seeing a predominance of neutrophils and occasional monos and macrophages.
So this in here, and this is kind of looking like some blue-black granules.
Oh, cool. Blue-black granules. So we have these qualitative findings. So typically, I guess they're qualitative findings, but blue-black granules would basically be the precipitated iron that's left over after red cells have been digested, essentially, right? So when you bleed into a tissue space, there'll be phagocytic cells that will eat the red cells and then break them down. So after lysing, the hemoglobin gets metabolized. So not uncommon where there might be a bleed.
And there are red cells.
Yep, there are red cells. Yep. Typically, blue-black granules and things follow the bleed by a period of time.
Yep. Yeah, because the blue-black granules are indicating that the red cells have had time to be broken down inside of the phagocytic cells. So you're not looking at a brand new bleed. Typically, it's usually an older bleed. But we're looking at a BAL. So the other thing that we could be looking at would be like tar in a smoker or junk that has been in the lungs that's being phagocytized. If we're looking at that sort of stuff, though, there's not usually a like the red cells that kind of go with, like this one has red cells. And with the tarry smoker lung, you're expecting to see it really widespread throughout the entire slide, which we're not seeing here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I mean, it can be like black, like black.
A nice spready guy here.
Yep. Yep. Awesome macrophage.
There we go. It almost looks like there was a basophil here.
It's possible. I'm definitely impressed with how clean the slide is. Ooh, this is a big boy.
Again, just kind of checking out the clump to see if there's anything here.
Yep. And like stuff like areas of gunk like this at a BAL, not uncommon.
Yeah.
Nothing to be alarmed about.
So with these big, ugly, junky cells, how come they aren't malignant?
Yeah, so I'll definitely admit that some of these, like, like this fella right here, right? Not the greatest looking cell. But when I start to test it, right? So one of the things I really like to look for in malignant cells is the nuclear contour. So if I trace this nuclei, I don't really see anything that's too troubling. Every time I see a point to where it like indents, there's a vacuole there, right? So there's a physical thing like pushing on it. So
Yeah.
Nuclear contour actually looks normal. If I had to critique, if that's the right word, the darkness of the nucleus is like a little bit on the dark side, but trying to be sensitive to how like condensed it is too, right? So this looks like it's probably a monocyte, and it looks a little bit squished. So colors are going to get a little bit darker.
This guy though has all those granules like those malignant cells we saw in those CSFs.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And the findings in the cytoplasm can be significant. But the other thing to consider, though, is that this is a BAL, and this is a phagocytic cell. I don't know what it's been kind of gobbling up in the environment. So I'm less alarmed about the granulation. And then when I look at the nucleus, I'm reassured by the nucleus. So when it comes to cancer, it's always going to be, well, everything goes back to the genetics. I mean, that's the primary condition, right? There's some kind of a lesion, improper translocation, or something wrong with the genome, and it's usually represented well in the nucleus in one or more ways. But the nuclear contour looks normal to me. There's dark clumping and then lighter areas. Nothing that strikes me as odd in the heterochromatin. I mean, it's not a pretty cell, but I also don't see anything that's like alarming to me. Yeah.
I agree. I just thought we should point out why
Devil's advocate.
it's not malignant.
Yeah. Yep.
The
We
other
also need to think about like for a malignant cell to appear inside the lung tissue, the alveolar space would be a little bit odd. Not a typical place we'd see malignancy.
lung cancer.
Yeah, I know, lung cancer. But the lung cancer is usually in that interstitial inside the tissues, right? So not so much on the outside of the lung, right? So this is, and that might sound weird to someone's ear. But like I consider like the esophagus, that's all outside the body, right? It's exposed to the environment. It's just not a typical place that you collect a.
Well, typically too, when you're talking about dealing with lung cancer, it's a tumor. It's not like
Right.
a widespread, like the bone marrow would be packed with like leukemia. It's when you're dealing with lung cancer, it's usually more of a solid ball of tumor cells that gets bigger and spreads and that kind of thing. It's not
Yep.
usually quite as dispersed throughout the lungs.
Yes, excellent point. There's a lot of other diagnostics to find solid tumors that's more effective and precise
That's
than
less us in the lab.
less us. Absolutely.
I just wanted to this guy here, it almost looks like there's bacteria here,
Does kind of look like there's something in there, right? Yep.
but it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
And the other thing is bacteria wouldn't be out of or the ordinary with the BAL either. Typically contamination from the throat because you're sticking the thing in and then it's going
Yep.
down someone's throat and then into the space. And ideally, you wouldn't have contamination, but
Yeah. 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 You don't really ruffle as much feathers when you say there's bacteria on a slide like this. They just kind of, you know,
I also wouldn't judge it just based off of those two little things in there. I look around
yes.
more and I haven't seen anything else like it, but
Yep. Yeah. It's way more likely that something like that you're going to see. Um, it'll be numerous
yeah.
in something like a BAL, in my experience. I hope you all have beautiful morphology like this on every BAL you count, but most assuredly, this is not the norm.
I was looking to see if there was any other bacteria or columnar epis or anything in here, but I'm not seeing any of it.
Another good thing to look for too is like fungal elements, right? So
Yes.
immunocompromised patients can develop like fungal infections in the lungs and cause the respiratory disease, which then prompts the BAL, and so on.
I found an EO.
Yeah, that's fascinating, huh?
Okay. I mean, not a whole lot else, just
Yeah.
mostly our normal hematopoietic elements.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, I think that's all for this one. So, thanks for listening.
Thank you for your time.